Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to GabonNews.com. Today we receive in our studios the Ambassador of the United States of America, Mr. Eric Benjaminson. Thank you for being with us, Mr. Ambassador.
It's a pleasure, thank you.
So, you have served as an ambassador in Gabon for the last 2 years. How has your experience been so far?
It's been great, and I think it's partly because of the period in history that Gabon is in. There's been an awful lot of change in this country in the last 2.5 years, and it's been a privilege to be able to watch it.
Speaking of changes, you came at a time of transition for Gabon, and what do you think of some of the reforms that have been implemented by the current president so far?
No, I mean, we're very supportive of them. The reforms, I think, are necessary to accomplish what the president wants to accomplish in terms of the Gabon Emergent program. So you have to attract diverse investors, you have to make the business climate work, you have to look at infrastructure issues, health care for people, and all of that is being accomplished. In fact, the only criticism I would make, it's not really a criticism, is your government's doing a lot at the same time, and I think they're doing the right things, but there's a lot of energy that is correctly being expended to do those things. But they are attracting interest in my country.
Yeah. So is this your first experience in Africa, or?
No, I've served in Nigeria, Côte d'Ivoire, Burkina Faso, Namibia, South Africa, and I worked in Africa from Washington.
Okay. So how does the environment differ from here and the other places you've been to?
It's an interesting question. Gabon is changing more in a short period of time than those other countries were when I was there. Gabon also has a kind of formality in society and in governance that was not as the same formality did not exist in Nigeria, in Burkina Faso. I mean, you have a tendency to do a lot in writing and to do it quite formally, and that is good because it makes very clear what the next steps are, and it makes very clear what the interrelationships are. Sometimes it takes more time than if you just did everything by email, but that's one thing that I've noticed. The other thing is you're a society and economy based on natural resources, and that gives a whole different feel to the economy than an economy like Burkina Faso that's based on commerce and small business. You're a very different economy, and it's a very different feel as you go through the city.
Of course. So how would you characterize the bilateral cooperation between the U.S. and Gabon?
It's excellent, and I feel like I should highlight the period in which Gabon was on the UN Security Council, because we have a number of interests here. Some of them are helping you achieve your goals, and quite frankly, some of them are helping ourselves achieve our goals. And the period that we went through when Gabon served with us on the Security Council, for example, there was the Libya situation, the fall of the Gbagbo government in Côte d'Ivoire, problems beginning in Syria. These are very complicated, messy issues, and the cooperation that existed between Gabon, who was one of the African representatives in the Security Council, was really excellent. And it was partly for that reason that President Obama wanted President Bongo Ndimba to come to Washington to further discuss that kind of thing. I will say that we're not only interested in the international relations, we have interests in helping you move forward in your own area. So if it's business investment, if it's the security of this maritime region, if it's conservation, fight against poaching, the fight to preserve the wildlife and wild areas of Gabon, those are all areas that we've prioritized.
Yes. So of course, there are various common interests between the two countries, but what are the top priorities of the U.S. government or the policy towards Gabon?
Well, to be fair to American citizens in Gabon, our top priority is making sure they're taken care of and well protected. But that isn't, I mean, generally that's not a problem. So in a day-to-day work, that's not what we do every day. I would say the main priorities, I don't know what the order is, but the first one would be taking advantage of your opening business environment, attracting U.S. investors, not just for them, but for what the technology is they bring in, the training, the job possibilities. So some of them are in the oil petroleum business, some are in now conservation, in ecotourism, forestry, timber products. So we have people coming in all those sectors. Another area I mentioned before is conservation. We're very interested, your president and some of his counselors have a very strong relationship with nature here, and you're still one of the last areas of really active forest, unspoiled Central African forests, which serve as lungs for the planet, and so keeping that for climate change purposes is important. The other area I'd mention is and I touched on it before, maritime security. You're in a difficult region with piracy that happens in Cape Verde, Senegal, Gambia, Nigeria, and it's starting down here too, and you have illegal fishing problems. So we want to help with that because it's in the interest of international trade and maritime safety that this big Gulf that we're all in is well protected.
So one of the president's focal points is obviously the Green Gabon initiative. Back in April, you took part in a seminar that was dealing with the illegal poaching questions. So what progress has been made in that sector?
No, that's very important. We were doing that in collaboration with your government, both the Ministry of Water and Forests and the Agence Nationale des Parcs Nationaux, but also with the Central African Republic, which has found that it has similar issues. And the goal was that we've had experience in building networks to fight poaching and to fight trafficking, whether it's in people, weapons, drugs. We've worked with Southeast Asian countries to do that. We've worked in Latin America. We did it in the US with Canada. And so the idea was your government and the government of the Central African Republic are worried about the loss of elephants and the loss of biodiversity, and that has an effect on ecotourism.
Of course.
And you have armed people from wherever they come from, coming through Chad, Cameroon, Central African Republic, corners of Gabon to Congo, and they're causing problems for your security. So we were trying to help you build a network where all of these countries could talk to each other. If you notice in the last few months, there's been more activity in this region of governments fighting against poaching. And that, I like to think that came in part from our conference because your experts now know who the experts are in Yaoundé, in Bangui, and Kinshasa, and they've literally called them up and said, you know, we met in Libreville. We know that you have poachers coming from Central African Republic into Chad. Maybe you can help us find them. So that kind of thing is growing, but we do want to encourage it to keep going. It's you've got 6 or 7 countries that have to work together.
Of course. So another sector field in which the U.S. Embassy has been very active is the communication, the press.
Here we are.
Yes. You recently met the head of the CNC.
Yeah, several times.
And there was also a seminar at the U.S. Embassy. So what are the purposes and objectives of such initiatives?
Well, Gabon has, from my own observation, a very free, energetic press. If you look at the papers, there's the sort of government-owned paper, the papers that are aligned with the government. There's all of the independent or papers aligned with opposition parties, and that's very vibrant. There are difficulties that come up in that domain which have to be managed in the sense that people get insulted by the way certain stories are written. People feel that they're being libeled or that it's not accurate. On the other hand, you have an underlying commitment to press freedom, which we have, and we feel very strongly about that. So part of this, the idea of these journalists, these seminarists that came, was twofold. One was to share some experiences, because we have the same problems. I mean, if somebody writes that President Obama was not born in the United States, he was born in Kenya and he's been lying to the American public, I mean, that's a very serious thing to say about a servant. But we don't close the newspapers down when they do that. We use legal action, or we just ignore it, frankly. He was trying to show the examples we have for dealing with those issues. And he was also trying to improve professionalism of journalists, because not all the journalists in Gabon are equally trained. And so to help train people as to what is a legitimate story, I mean, what's really a news story, and when are you just passing rumors that you hear on the street? That's not necessarily the best way to do journalism. So we've been trying to do that. I will say we had another speaker a year ago with the the work with the former, the predecessor of the current CNC head. And I do want to also say that we did this with the help and cooperation of the CNC, but we were careful also to keep some of it independent so that we could deal with the independent media and they could be, they felt free to speak critically without the idea that they were being monitored.
So both initiatives were greatly accepted and praised by the press. So to conclude,
we'd like to keep doing it.
Yes, of course, and we welcome you to do it. And so to conclude, do you have any special message you would like to give to the Gabonese people or international community?
Yeah, just that the U.S. government, my embassy, we're very excited about what we see happening here, but it's not simple. I mean, you have a complex society. It was run in one fashion under the former president. There are changes in the way governance is happening now. I'm not making a value judgment. They're different. And that transition is a difficult transition. It would be difficult for anybody. And we do that when we change from one party to another. I just sort of, from the experience of being an outsider living here, I would counsel patience. It takes a long time to change governance style. It takes a long time to fix the infrastructure, the roads, the hospitals. I see a real attempt is being made to do that, but it can't be done in 1 month or 3 months or 6 months. So you should, the journalistic group, your colleagues, should continue to, in my opinion, make sure that the president and the administration are living up to their promises. But at the same time, you may want to find a way to counsel the population that they should be patient as long as they see forward progress. It's what your government is trying to accomplish now is very difficult, complicated, and expensive. So if everybody can be a little patient about it, that might be a good way to work.
Yes. Okay,
All right.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, no problem.
So this concludes our interview. Information continues on www.gabonnews.com. Thank you for having been with us. Bye.